In 1981, in Northern Ireland, people keep losing their lives since 1969 because of political and religious violence, known as the Troubles. The British government removes the political status from prisoners linked to paramilitary groups, treating them like regular criminals now. In response, some Irish Republican prisoners in Maze prison start a protest called the Blanket and No Wash Protest. These men refuse to wear prison uniforms and stop cleaning themselves. They want to prove they are not criminals, but political prisoners, and they promise to keep protesting until they are treated that way. Early one morning, outside the prison, a prison officer named Raymond Lohan starts his day. He stands in his bathroom, turns on the cold tap, and dips his wounded hand into the basin. He holds it there for a few seconds, feeling the sting and thinking back to old injuries. After pulling his hand from the water, he dries it gently, puts his ring back on, gets dressed in his uniform, and heads downstairs. He makes a simple breakfast, tea and toast, and eats alone in silence. Then he steps outside, gets into his car, and starts the engine. Meanwhile, a radio report plays, talking about the protests at Maze prison and how long they've been going on. The announcer criticizes the prisoners, saying they are using crime to push political goals. He adds that this is just what the government wants, to show them as nothing more than violent criminals. Inside Maze prison, a young man gets arrested and brought to the intake area. He refuses to wear the prison uniform, saying he will only wear his own clothes. The guards respond by stripping him and throwing him into a small cell. Inside, the new prisoner stands there, unsure, while another prisoner, Gillen, watches him quietly from across the narrow room. After a short pause, Gillen speaks in a calm, steady voice to break the silence. Without hesitation, he brings up names and places that matter in their world. He mentions Fancy Quinn and the Falls Road, strong symbols of resistance in their community. The new prisoner nods, showing he knows them both, and that small gesture eases the tension between them. Gillen moves the conversation to something more real, their sentences. He says he still has 6 years left. The other man listens, then tells Gillen he's been given 12 years. Gillen's face shifts, not with surprise, but with understanding. He knows exactly how heavy each year behind bars can feel. The new prisoner notices the quiet empathy in Gillen's eyes, glances at him, and with a faint smirk, jokes that Gillen's the lucky one for having less time. Gillen answers with a low, almost thankful smile, quietly agreeing. The two men share a quiet laugh, a small moment of understanding in a place designed to break them down. In that brief instant, they find comfort in each other's presence, a reminder that even in a harsh and cold place like this, shared struggle still holds meaning. Afterwards, Gillen takes his water bowl and carefully pours the water along the edge of his cell wall, drawing a faint boundary. Then he tips the rest into the hallway. In other cells nearby, more men follow the gesture, each pouring water to leave lines or marks on their own floors. The water spreads slowly, leaving the corridor damp and heavy with silence. Later, guards led Gillen and the man beside him, along with other protest prisoners, into the visiting area to meet their families. The man receives a small package from his wife, quietly slipping a tiny hidden radio into his pocket. That night, when the lights go out, the men gather near a small window and turn it on, listening closely to the muffled voices and distant music from the world outside. That soft crackle of sound brings a kind of warmth, a reminder that something still waits beyond the thick gray walls. Late into the night, Gillen quietly leaves his bunk and pulls out a small piece of paper. In the dim glow, he begins to moan softly and touches himself. The others sleep nearby, unaware. It's a brief release, a moment that makes him feel human again in a place where they're meant to forget what that means. One morning, guards enter the wing with more force than usual. They pick out a prisoner who refuses to cut his hair and beard. He pushes back hard. In the chaos that follows, the guards hit him, and he breaks away for a second. Raymond, among the officers, lashes out and punches the wall, caught in a mix of frustration and helpless anger. They finally pin the man down, shave him by force, and throw him back into his cell, bruised and worn out. Elsewhere, in the visiting room, Bobby Sands sits across from his mother and father. His face shows bruises and deep tiredness, but he gives his mother a soft smile and meets her eyes with quiet strength. His mother, clearly worried, asks gently if he's getting any medical care. Bobby gives a small nod, trying to ease her fears, and signals that the guards are handling it. He He then shifts the talk to his younger brother. His father smiles, saying the boy is doing well. Still uneasy, his mother wonders softly if Bobby is eating enough. Bobby lowers his voice and tells her not to worry. Then, leaning forward with care, he tells her she's looking healthy. She blushes just a little, replying that he looks good too, at least to her. Soon, a voice nearby says the visit is over. Bobby looks at his parents one last time, then stands up and walks away under the watchful eyes of the guards, leaving behind the comfort of being with family. Meanwhile, in the chapel, a priest stands before the prisoners. He speaks with calm weight in his voice. He quotes scripture, "The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears hear their cries." He speaks of comfort, of deliverance, of strength for those with wounded hearts. His voice rises and dips with feeling, echoing through the room. The men listen in stillness, some slowly nodding while others stay quiet, holding their thoughts close as the priest finishes and gently calls them to prayer, his voice calm but steady in the echo of the chapel. Elsewhere, in a small cell dimly lit by the morning light, Bobby sits alone, unrolling a handmade cigarette from a torn piece of paper, lighting it slowly as the smoke rises and curls around his face, while his eyes scan the worn notes in his lap, carefully written reminders, hidden strategies, and names of the men who stand beside him in protest, each word carrying the weight of purpose. By the next morning, when the guards arrive with clean uniforms and demand compliance, the prisoners respond with fire, not silence, as anger erupts all at once. Men shouting in rage, tearing apart their cells, smashing the little furniture they have, breaking whatever they can find, and yelling IRA with a wild, fierce intensity that bounces off the stone walls and fills every corner of the wing. Later, guards come charging in, storming cell after cell, pulling men out roughly, beating them hard, and searching them in the harshest way possible, checking inside mouths, under nails, along seams of clothes, making sure no radios or hidden items remain, and turning the process into something more than a search, something that strips away whatever dignity the prisoners still hold. Outside those walls, as the sun starts to drop, Raymond drives home after his shift, his eyes tired and his hands still stiff from the long day. Pulling up to a small house with a neat little garden, stepping out with a bouquet of white daisies resting on the front seat, which he carries inside where an elderly woman sits alone on the sofa, quietly waiting in the soft light of the living room. He gently places the flowers on the table and asks why she's sitting there by herself. But before she can reply, a man steps out from the hallway, raises a gun, and shoots Raymond in the back, dropping him to the floor where he dies without a word as the woman lets out a scream, her voice cracking the silence while the house turns cold with sudden tragedy. Deep inside May's prison, Bobby sits across from Father Dom in a plain, quiet room where the air feels thick with something unsaid. And Dom begins slowly, trying to keep it light by bringing up the Falls Road and asking if Bobby still thinks about the countryside, while Bobby, with a calm voice and steady eyes, talks about how he visits his younger brother every month and misses the wide green fields, the clean air, and the stillness that reminds him of who he used to be. Though Belfast feels rough, noisy, and broken, Bobby says this is his duty, this is his work. And when your fight is for the soul, the place you stand doesn't matter as much as the reason you're standing there. Dom notices the bruises on Bobby's face, the fading color in his cheeks, and gently asks what happened. And while Bobby tries to shrug it off, he eventually says it came from a disagreement, the kind that happens when people are pushed too far, and the mood in the room shifts as Bobby leans forward and tells Dom the real reason he called him in. That a second hunger strike is set to begin on March 1st. Dom's face tightens as Bobby explains how this strike will be different, how men will join in phases, one every 2 weeks, to keep the pressure steady and avoid what happened last time, when emotions broke them after one man became too weak to bear watching. And now, with 75 men ready, the strike will go on no matter what. Dom, shaken by the scale of it, warns Bobby of the cost, how many might die, how families could be torn, how the movement itself could lose strength. But Bobby, calm and certain, says even if they die, something deeper will rise from it, something that may not be seen now, but will burn brighter in those who come next, a kind of rebirth made from what they leave behind. Dom presses harder, asking if Bobby really wants to die. But Bobby explains it's not about dying. It's about not giving in, about standing firm and choosing their own fate, refusing to let the government decide whether they live or not. Dom, overwhelmed, says hunger strikes should call for change, not walk straight toward death, and he pleads with Bobby to rethink, to find a middle path. But Bobby only replies that no talks mean nothing unless Britain agrees to their demands. Dom, frustrated and sad, tells Bobby he's forgetting what life is for, reminds him of the kindness he once gave to people in his own neighborhood, and wonders where that version of him has gone. But Bobby, quiet and thoughtful, begins to tell a story from when he was 12. It was a cross-country race in the hills of Donegal, and he was traveling with other boys, some Catholic, some Protestant, when they came across a foal near a stream, bleeding and broken, its legs snapped and its eyes fading. The boys argued over what to do, one suggesting they end it quickly, and while Bobby stood in silence for a moment, he then stepped forward, knelt beside the foal, held its head under the water, and waited until it stopped moving. And though he was punished later, he believed then, and still believes now, that what he did was not cruelty, but mercy, an act that showed him the difference between hesitation and responsibility. When he finishes the story, Dom stays quiet, lost in thought, as Bobby leans back with a tired smile, watching Dom light a cigarette, the two of them sitting in silence before Bobby says, half joking, that the paper he used to roll his own might have come from Scripture. Dom, without much to say, mentions that Bobby may not be here the next time they meet, and Bobby, without flinching, nods, because in his mind, the path is already set. Down the corridor, a janitor moves through the hallway with a mop and a bucket, wiping away the water the prisoners poured the night before, muttering under his breath as he repeats the same thankless job again. Days pass, and the hunger strike begins to show its weight. Bobby lies on a stretcher, thinner with every hour, his face hollow, his limbs too weak to move, as doctors quietly explain to his parents that his liver, kidneys, and pancreas are shutting down, his heart struggling to keep going, his bones soft from the lack of nutrients, and his intestines bleeding inside. Bed sores cover his back, and his body is too far gone for healing. They say only care and hydration might help a little, but there is no going back now. He grows weaker with every breath. Bobby says nothing. He cannot sit up, cannot speak, and can barely open his eyes. One day, after struggling for a while, he manages to rise and head for a bath, but halfway through, his legs give out, and he collapses, hitting his head hard on the cold floor. A doctor rushes in, lifts him gently, and places him back on the stretcher. Bobby's eyes open slowly, filled with pain, scanning the room, only to find harsh walls and brighter than necessary lights that press into his skull like weight. A few moments pass and he wakes again, this time to see a small child standing quietly beside him. The boy places his hand into Bobby's, eyes calm and steady, offering a kind of softness that the outside world rarely gives to men locked behind bars. Later, his parents come to visit again, moving gently around the room, brushing their hands against his shoulders, whispering words filled with love. Bobby holds his mother's hand tightly, his smile weak but warm, then turns his gaze to his father, eyes lingering as if reaching for old memories. Laughter on a bus to Donegal, rolling hills flashing past the window, the feeling of freedom before the weight of struggle settled in. And then, quietly, Bobby dies, his body finally giving out after 66 long, punishing days of refusing food as part of the hunger strike. At the same time, even while he remains locked away, he is elected as a member of the British Parliament for Fermanagh and South Tyrone, a result that draws massive attention not just from people in Northern Ireland, but from across the globe. His death becomes a powerful symbol of courage, of sacrifice, of a man standing firm in what he believes, even at the cost of his life. 7 months later, the hunger strike ends, but by then, 9 more prisoners have died from starvation, their names etched alongside Bobby's in the story of the protest. During the same period, as the blanket and no-wash protests rage on, 16 prison officers are killed in paramilitary attacks, underlining just how deep and dangerous the conflict has become. In the weeks and months that follow, the British government agrees to several of the prisoners' demands. They're allowed to wear their own clothes, they're given more freedom of movement inside the prison, and overall treatment improves. But even then, the government refuses to officially label them as political prisoners, which was the core reason behind the protest from the beginning. Because of this, the outcome sits in a strange place. It feels like a win, but not a full one. The men gain better conditions, but not the recognition they had risked everything for. Still, Bobby Sands' death leaves a mark so deep it becomes a turning point, a story passed from one generation to the next, reminding the world of how far someone will go when they believe with everything they have that their cause is right.